Hello, Montana. I want to welcome everybody to this first edition of Montana Investigates. My name is Sean, and I will be analyzing political ads in Montana. I do not discriminate. I'm going to look at ads from both parties or all parties, and we are paring them down to find the truth, the lies, and the misrepresentations which so freely follow these ads that we see. We're also going to look into the organizations that are actually creating and funding these ads, which I think is the most important thing. Just so I'm completely honest with my viewers, I want to share a little bit about me. I'm a third or fourth generation Montanan who grew up in eastern Montana on the High Line. I attended the University of Montana before going on to graduate school and then joining the U.S. Army. I left the Army and then worked in national security for a combined 27 plus years. That's including my time in the Army. I'm a lifelong Montana Republican. I want to be honest with my viewers. I was about that. I think it's important. I was a student Republican. I was in student Republican organizations in high school and at the University of Montana. I did low-level work for Montana Republicans like former Governor Mark Roscoe, Jack Sands, and I interned in D.C. with the late Senator Conrad Burns. Having said that, I'm a Montanan first, and some of the recent politics of Montana has really fired me up. I will be improving this channel as we go along, so please bear with me today. This is the first edition. In the future, I'll have options where you'll be able to contact me. Anything I say which maybe is incorrect and you want to correct me, I'm willing to hear that and to make those corrections if necessary. For this first edition, we are going to be looking at two identical flyers concerning independent candidate for U.S. Senate, Seth Bodnar. He's the former president of the University of Montana, which were recently sent to the citizens of Madison County. And the two flyers came out sometime the week of July 19th to 25th. Two basically came out that same week. Here is what the first one looked like, and we will focus primarily on analyzing aspects of this one just because the second one is very similar, same wording, basically the same picture. So we'll focus on what was said basically in that first one. Now, I just want to make a note about that. When you get two flyers like that in the mail from the same organization, basically in the same week, it's a tactic that they use. They know that most people do not read the details of the flyers they send out. They know that. But what they're trying to do is give you the message enough times that even though you're not really reading, you're starting to believe it. And that's a tactic that's used for propaganda machines throughout the world. Russia, China, they all do the same tactic. And unfortunately, so do our political parties and those who support them. Okay, I'm going to start on every edition with let's look at who actually put out this flyer, because I think that's what I think just brings it all down to the truth. And if you see here, this flyer was paid for by the American Leadership Fund, 5185 MacArthur Boulevard Northwest, Box 425, Washington, D.C. I actually lived in Washington for a while. I know this neighborhood. This is not downtown Washington, D.C. This is a suburb, basically, of Washington, D.C. It's also a very kind of, I would say, more wealthier neighborhood. There's some pretty nice houses out there. But again, I just want to understand, this is not some huge organization that is in the middle of D.C. that is within the D.C. kind of network of political organizations. And what makes this organization particularly interesting is if you look at their headquarters, that's the building right there. It's not for as far as I know, I'll be willing to be corrected on this, it is not those top windows at the top of the building. It is that UPS store, which is centered in the photograph. So this organization, which wants to influence you about the elections in Montana, is based out of a UPS store in suburban Washington, D.C. Kind of interesting if you ask me. That's the first thing that right away made me want to look into this a little bit deeper So this gentleman right here, Stephen Replogle, sorry, Stephen, if I said your name wrong. He also works for Capital Consulting Group. He is the president, at least as far as I can tell in recent IRS tax documents, of the American Leadership Fund. Looks like a nice guy, got a nice smile, nice suit. But he is the one who is, again, headquarters out of a UPS store, at least his mailing address is a UPS store in Washington, D.C. He's the one who wants to convince you about certain aspects or certain things that he believes are true about Seth Bodnar. So I did a little bit of digging into this organization, basically just going through tax documents that are available, publicly available. And I went to ProPublica. You can see this is a free website. You can go there. You can figure out nonprofit organizations. They put all of their tax documents on there. I found the one for the American Leadership Fund. This is from 2024. Was not able to find the 2025. I will look again, though, just to make sure. But these are interesting to look at because it gives a good snapshot of what the organization does, the money they get, where they spend the money, generally, not very specific. And it's just a good place to start if you really want to look at an organization that claims that it is a nonprofit organization. As you move through the document, it's good. Some good information you can see in the revenue column there towards the top of your screen, or right at the top there. For revenue, it says contributions and grants. Last year they made, this would have been 2023 tax year. For the 2024 tax year, they made $9,600. So pretty good chunk of change that they have at their disposal. And then also you can see at their expenses, you go down that a little bit. You can see their expenses. They basically said that total expenses for 2024, again, was they about spent all their money. $9.5 million is what is at their disposal. It's kind of interesting that, if I am correct, and their headquarters is that UPS, the PO box, you think they could spend a little bit more money and at least have some, decent offices, but they don't. In the Form 990, it's kind of interesting. They have to tell a little bit about what they do, just I guess, so the IRS, they need to go back and kind of investigate this stuff. They have to talk about who is in their organization, who are their board members, things like that. I found this interesting. This is the section A. It's officers, directors, trustees, key employees. And on part A there, which I don't show the whole part of it, but it just lists all of their board of directors. Like there are 5 or 6 of them. And again, we have Stephen there at the top, as you can see at the very bottom of the screen. What I find was kind of funny about this, though, it says average hours per week. I guess how many hours they work in the organization. And then they also still list any hours for related organizations below the dotted line, and every one of them said 0. So I don't know if that means they aren't working. It's kind of an interesting thing. I guess sometimes we all fill out tax documents like this, maybe, but supposedly they're not working, at least according to their Form 990 in the year 2024, to be specific. This is the part I really like about the 990. It says, okay, who are the organizations you have given money to? That's that part 2. Grants and other assistance to domestic organizations and domestic government. So they have to list that, at least to a certain amount. I also noticed that in that part 1, just the question, does this organization maintain records to substantiate the amount of the grants or assistance, the grantees' eligibility for the grants or assistance, and the selection criteria used to award the grants? They said no. That's kind of interesting. Maybe they don't have to. Part 2, though, again, you're looking at the organizations they give money to. I would just notice the largest number there is to the only one that at least from 2024 in the state of Montana is the Montana Policy Action, which has a PO box in Billings, Montana. They gave them over $3 million, which I thought was sounds like a pretty good chunk of change for the Montana Policy Action. Here, I just did just a close up. That's the actual entry from their Form 990. So Montana Policy Action has a website. It's just MontanaPolicyAction1word.com. Pretty basic website, not a whole lot of information. I've just their front page there. You can read a little about what they do. It says, I'm going to the second line there. It says, we are committed to realizing that vision by addressing the nation's most pressing challenges, embracing its vast opportunities through advocacy, research, and persuasive dialogue. The next line, we believe that engaged citizens committed to holding our political leaders accountable can bring about real change that leads to enhanced economic opportunities, great individual freedoms, and increased transparency in government. Okay, so far sound good. Everything sounds good. Again, this is not the organization, at least as far as I know, had any part in sending this flyer, but the organization that sent the flyer supports organizations all over America. But as far as I can see, at least in their 2024 tax documents, this is the only one in the state of Montana. Now, my focus isn't going to be on who they support. We're going to, again, our focus is on their actual flyer they're sent out and what's presented in that flyer. But I just want to note one thing is I checked the address for Montana Policy Action. Just want to see where they're located. And what was interesting, when I did a Google search of that, I found that there were several organizations in Montana that shared the same P.O. box. As you can see, I'm listed here. Contacts our 1776 Foundation, Montana Agricultural Heritage Foundation, Montana Veterans Alliance, and then, of course, the Montana Public Policy Center. Just very interesting. So try to figure that out. Why would they all share one P.O. box? Well, digging a little deeper, I saw the same people formed all of these organizations. So they're basically all ran by the same people, at least all created by the same people. This kind of drew my interest. So I went to their websites. Again, for just the Montana Policy Action, let me just show you their website really quick. Again, they have this very basic homepage talking about what they do. They have a newsletter you can sign up for. They have a contact us page. And then they have a petitions page, which they say there are no active petitions. So it's kind of really a basic, very basic website, which is, to me, is kind of interesting. If you're receiving that amount of money, $3 million, it just asks the question, what are you doing with it? So just interesting. It's something I wanted to point out. I'm not claiming anything. I don't know anything about these guys. Maybe in the future I will go and talk to these guys, figure out what they're doing with all that money that they supposedly received. But I just thought it was interesting. But again, they have other websites or other organizations that are connected to the same P.O. box and were created by the same people who created the Montana Policy Action. One is the 1776 Foundation. Again, all these organizations would be conservative, work on conservative issues. I also thought it was kind of interesting that they all have their own license, or not all of them, at least two of them. I didn't check all of them completely, but they all sell the license plate. So if you see that Don't Tread on Me license plate, which is pretty popular in Montana, it's going to the 1776 Foundation, which again has the same P.O. box as the Montana Policy Action organization. Again, they also share the same P.O. box with the Montana Veterans Alliance. These guys are pretty active. They kind of seem like they're stretching across very kind of diverse issues. Just kind of interesting to me. And then also the Montana Agricultural Heritage Society. Again, they're all of them are pretty basic websites, provide a little bit of basic information, but really don't say a lot about who they support, what they do. They have pages to give out grants, things like that. But again, it's kind of interesting to me that they're all connected to the same mailbox. And the Montana Agricultural Heritage Society also has a license plate that you could buy that I guess they get some kind of revenue from that. I just thought that was a little interesting. So they do political action stuff, but they also have a license plate, I guess, probably to raise revenue. Okay, again, I don't want to spend too much time digging into the organization. I just want to give you a flavor for the organization that's putting out this flyer or these flyers. I've also noticed, I think they're doing some ads on TV too. I think I caught that for a couple of the ads, so we'll eventually look at those. But now I just want to start digging in to the meat of this flyer they sent out and starting to analyze certain aspects of it. Okay, as you can see at the top of the flyer, it says Liberal Seth Bodnar helped bring poorly vetted migrants from dangerous countries to Montana. And then it goes on, America has always welcomed refugees, but national security and the safety of American citizens must come first. I don't think anybody disagrees with that, including Mr. Bodnar. That means securing our borders and properly vetting those who come to our shores, especially if they come from our countries that are known to be havens for crime and terrorism. Okay, then now we're starting to get into kind of the accusations that our guys in the UPS store in suburban DC make against Mr. Bodnar. Under Seth Bodnar's leadership, the University of Montana partnered with a group that placed so-called refugees in Montana from well-known bastions of terrorism. So it gives the impression that he actively worked to bring possible terrorists. I mean, they don't say that, but that's basically what they're inferring to the Montana. Then they continue on. They say, with Bodnar's help, this group brought people from 30 countries, including Afghanistan, Iran, Syria, and Venezuela. Despite red flags about the proper vetting that led dangerous criminals into our communities. Well, here I blew it up for you, the actual part that we just read. Now, it's an interesting part, and this is something you'll see throughout propaganda machines throughout the world, Russia, China, all the bad actors, is basically what they do is they usually have two facts. Two things that are true, that are undeniable, everybody knows they're facts. But then they try to make a very tenuous link between those two facts. And that's basically what I believe you are seeing here. Okay, the first fact is just basically that Seth Bodnar was the University of Montana president. Fact, everybody knows that, undisputed. The second fact that is actually true, and we'll talk a bit about it, is there is an organization that did help bring refugees to Missoula, specifically to Missoula, and we'll go more in depth into that organization and what they did. But before we move on to that aspect, I just want to point out a couple of things. The first is that Seth Bodnar, even as the University of Montana president, has no authority, power, influence whatsoever to bring anybody in to the United States of America. Full stop. He doesn't. And neither does this organization. It's called Soft Landing Missoula, which we're going to talk a little bit about them too. So neither of these organizations on their own have that power. So I just want to, it may not be really understood by people who have not dealt with immigration issues before, but it's a very basic point, but I just want to put that out there right away. So when it comes to immigration, so if a foreigner is going to come to the United States to work, to study, to live, to vacation, whatever it is, there are basically two gates they have to go through in most circumstances. Now, there are some special circumstances. I'll highlight those a little bit. I'm not going to get too much in depth to this, but I just want to give you a general understanding. The first one is the U.S. Department of State. They are kind of the first gate for anybody wanting to come to the United States. So if you are a foreigner from another country and wanting to come to the United States, your first step in most cases is you go directly to a U.S. embassy overseas, most likely in the country you are from. You go there, you apply for a visa. Depending on the country, there are some countries that aren't required visas, but most of these countries which are actually named in this flyer require visas 100%. And they go through a vetting interview with a Department of State consular officer. Now, these consular officers have some training. It's not years of training. It's mostly maybe for specific consular work, maybe a couple months. And then most of it they learn on the job. Now, so somebody comes in to interview to get a visa to travel to the United States. They're interviewed by this person. This person asks them questions about purpose for travel, looks at any documents they have. They look at how much money they may have in the bank or what their job is. And looking at that information, they try to assess, is this person going to be a risk coming into the United States? Now, besides just asking those questions, they have access to some government intelligence community databases where they can type the name in, and if there is some issue with this person, or if this person has been in the United States before and had committed crime and it was kicked out, they're going to be notified while they're doing this interview about this information about this person. Now, this system isn't perfect. These interviews could last anywhere from, I mean, I've seen 30 seconds and they're done to maybe 20 minutes and anywhere in between, but they're usually pretty quick. But it is on the person that wants to come to the United States to prove that they're not going to be a risk. They're not assumed, that basically they're assumed to be guilty until proven innocent in this process. Mistakes are made sometimes. To do an interview in that little bit of time with none of information something may have, yeah, people are going to make mistakes. So it does happen. It's just the way it is. I don't know if there's a way to do the system better. One thing I just want to point out too is that the United States government makes billions, I don't know the actual number anymore, of dollars from these interviews. So anytime one person comes in an interview, do one of these interviews, they pay a fee. It could be substantial in the hundreds of dollars, depending on the year and where they're at, maybe. And if they fail the interview, or if they're not able to prove that they're a good person to come to the United States, they lose that money. But the United States makes a lot of money off these interviews. Okay, and then just the second gate, I said Department of State overseas is kind of the first gate getting in the United States. The second one is border protection. Now once you've received the visa overseas, you fly to the United States, you fly into an entry point, one of the major airports, and then again you go through, and if some of you have traveled overseas, you've done this where you get your passport stamped, you've come in and out. Well, this is kind of the second gate, because the officer there at the border, he has the ability to also turn this person around if he believes there's something fishy in there about their dress, what the questions they ask them, or if there's something in their luggage that was discovered. They have the ability to turn this person around and send them back to where they came from. So basically there's two gates, Department of State and Border Security. They're the two ones that control coming to the United States. Seth Bodnar has no control of that whatsoever. And this organization, Soft Landing Missoula, same thing. But let's go a little bit deeper though. You saw that, I just want to know, at the bottom of the screen here, you can see on the flyer, they cite sources for everything they say. And I think this is good, but I think they also know a lot of people don't always check the sources. And the sources are pretty vague. It took me a while. I couldn't find exactly what they're referring to. The actual February 5th, 2026 article, press release, Facebook page, whatever they were referring to, I couldn't really find that specific thing that they're referring to. So they could do a better job of putting more details in these references, so it's easier for the reader to find exactly what they're looking for. I don't know if that's intention or if that's just sloppy work on the part of our boys out of the UPS shop in suburban Washington, D.C. Okay, so here is the website of Soft Landing Missoula, the organization which is supposedly Mr. Bodnar worked with to bring these terrorists into the United States. Now, Soft Landing Missoula, they have a website. It's softlandingmissoula.org. And this is what the page looks like. They're very open about what they did. They say openly that, yes, in 2015, there were some concerned citizens of Missoula who were concerned about the civil war in Syria and wanted to see what they could do to help out. When they got together, they figured out that, of course, Montana was one of two states who wasn't actually accepting refugees from these war-torn countries. So they talked to the International Red Cross, and through those efforts, they were able to put an International Red Cross office, I believe, in Missoula, in Montana, but I'm pretty sure it's in Missoula. I tried to do some research to see if Mr. Bodnar, if he was an integral part of this effort. I wasn't able to find that anywhere. So if somebody listening out there has some information about this and they can show it to me and it's truthful, I will definitely make a correction. But I saw nothing that say that Mr. Bodnar was spending his time while he was the president of the University of Montana being fully involved in this organization or have any part in this organization. So again, what this organization does is so once those refugees coming to the United States, and that's one thing I didn't talk about. I said there's a standard way of coming into the United States through the Department of State, Border Security. Sometimes there's some unique situations like what we saw in Afghanistan, where the country basically fell apart while we were there. We were loading as many people as we thought were our allies onto those planes, flying them out. Same kind of thing happened in Vietnam after the fall of Saigon. So there are some situations where they don't actually follow that standard way of coming into the United States. But I want to say, though, I'm not 100% knowledgeable of all the aspects of this, but when there's a situation like Afghanistan or what happened in Vietnam, and they bring a mass of people unvetted, quote unquote, into the United States, once they get in the States, there is an effort to vet them before they send them out. I couldn't tell you the details of that, but I know that they usually put them on military bases. I've read some about this in Vietnam, dealing with the Hmong Cambodians, who a lot of them came over after the fall of Vietnam. But yeah, so there is still a process. I want you to know that. So what this organization does is, once those refugees are here in the United States, wherever they come in, and they register with the International Red Cross, this organization helped bring some of those people to Missoula. Okay, so that part again of the story is fact. They did do that. I don't know if they would say they were unvetted and that these people were told these people were bad. That's a little bit far-fetched for me. But that's what they did. So they brought them in. And what this organization does is they take those people, they try to integrate them into society. So instead of just letting them go in the community and, somebody from, let's say, Somalia trying to figure out how do I get around the United States, this organization spends time with them and their families, teaches them about the United States, try to show them how the things work. I assume they're giving them English lessons, things like that. And they're trying to make sure that once they're here, they're able to integrate and become a U.S. citizen. Now, generally, I don't have a problem with this at all, to tell you the truth. I mean, when my family came over from Russia or from Crimea and from Norway, Germany, I hear some of the stories. It was a pretty rough time, and I wish they would have had something like this. Maybe they did. It's not in my family history, but an organization actually sat down and helped them out. And I think overall, this is a good idea. If you want to help integrate these people, this is the perfect way to do it. Is have an organization like this that does it. Now, this organization, just to be truthful with everybody, is pretty liberal. If you go to their website, you'll see that they talk about there's some immigration or ICE kind of things in there, like where you can report ICE. So they're kind of involved in all of that stuff that's going on in the United States right now. But they're pretty open about it. You go to the website, they pretty much tell you everything they do. Okay, going back to again, how are they connected then to Mr. Bodnar? That's kind of the crux of this whole flyer, is that these two organizations work together to bring, they don't say it, but they're basically trying to convince you terrorists and knowing that they were terrorists into the state of Montana, which I think is just crazy. But they have on their website, they have their community partners. If you look at that, I dug as much as I could to see, how did they cooperate with Seth Bodnar or the University of Montana? I found a couple instances. One instance was where the Soft Landing Missoula brought a group of refugees who were going to be about college age, is my understanding. And they brought them to the University of Montana. They said, this is the University of Montana. And they talked about the opportunities at the University of Montana. Again, I have no problem with that. That seems pretty honest. I don't know why we wouldn't do something like that. We do that for every kid that's in Montana, every kid that comes from another foreign country, from Europe, from every kid in Montana. And that's what they're doing again. And I don't know why, if being in Missoula, if you agreed with what they do or not, I think for a university, it makes total sense. Why would you not do something like that? And if you go a little bit deeper onto that page, you'll see they have their major partners. IRC is the International Red Cross, Missoula County Public Schools, but then they have big thanks to our many organizations working with us. And then you can see down there at the bottom, they have the University of Montana. So, University of Montana did some effort to support this organization. But as far as I can see, they weren't the major push behind this. Doesn't sound like Seth Bodnar spent most of his time when he was the president of the University of Montana dealing with this organization. But of course, like any organization, I mean, if you dig down farther, I think you see Domino's Pizza was one of the people that supported him also. So I don't think Domino's Pizza is implicit in bringing quote unquote terrorists into Montana. But just wanted to show that. So there was that connection. That's the truth of this whole story. The lie, the misrepresentation, is to make you believe that Seth Bodnar played a major part in this, that he knew they were bad, that he did it anyway, and then he doesn't care. That's the lie. Misrepresentation, whatever you want to say. Okay, let's just move down again a little bit farther on that flyer. You'll see. Okay, so they've built this idea that these people came from Afghanistan, which they did on the soft landing Missoula. It says we brought 30 people. They list every country they brought them from. Some of those countries are not the best, to tell you the truth. But I'm telling you, if I was one of them, I'd want to be getting out of there also. My family personally left Crimea because and part of them left Crimea. The other part was arrested by the NKVD, which is the KGB of the 1920s in the Soviet Union. So I understand why these people are probably coming out of these places. They're not necessarily terrorists. Do we know? Yes, vetting is not perfect, but there is an effort to vet all these guys before they come over. But this is kind of interesting. So they've built this idea in your mind that Seth Bodnar is responsible for this at a high level, that as the president of the University of Montana, he played a significant part in bringing this about. And then they start showing you some examples. One is one of the Afghan refugees. I don't know if they were working with soft landing Missoula, but I assume he was. I'm not sure. Was charged with rape. Again, I like this. They gave a little site there, NBC Montana, 10/22/21 as their site. So I went to the NBC Montana page for that date. And again, here is the guy who they're mentioning in the flyer. This was a 19-year-old Afghan male. He went to a bar in Missoula. He met an 18-year-old, I assume, it doesn't really say, at least in this initial report, an 18-year-old female. Together, they went back to a hotel, and there she claims that he raped her, and he was charged with rape. You know, what an 18 and 19-year-old would do in a bar in the first place is that's another question, but not what we're talking about today. So that's the story behind that. So this guy came probably with the efforts of soft landing Missoula, came to Missoula, a young man, 19-year-old, involved in rape. Now, I tried to look at some updates this guy's case briefly. I saw something where maybe his charge was dropped to a misdemeanor sexual assault or something like that. But he was in the hands of ICE at that when this is going on. I don't know what his current status is, but that's what they're referring to when you see that on the flyer. So I just want to give you a little more detail on that. But again, Seth Bodnar, I don't think he brought this guy in. He probably didn't approve this guy to come in. It's just making a big leap. Yeah, showing some facts, some bad things that happened because of maybe the situation. But again, to put that on the back of Seth Bodnar it's kind of a bridge too far, I think. Okay, then they give another one, and this is dated. This came from, if you see in the bottom, cbsaustin.com, October 23rd, 21. This is the date after the last article I just showed you. So it's probably building on that past article. Yep, I'm not going to contest that this isn't true, that this is some lie. It's true, but again, what is this the connection to Seth Bodnar? They're building a story which isn't there. There's two facts they've established, 100% agree with them, and now they're trying to make this bridge that doesn't exist. And that is a common propaganda effort, tactic used by, our political parties, but also by people like the Russian SVR, the Chinese MSS, all the guys who do propaganda efforts. All of our enemies do propaganda efforts. And again, so here it is. Yeah, it's probably true, but I'm not going to go into any more facts been made. I agree with the fact. But I think we're going to move on to something that's a little bit more egregious on the part of our boys out of the UPS store in Washington, D.C. And the kind of last part of that flyer got blown up there. It says, Bodnar opposed border security and immigration enforcement. So that's interesting. So he actually opposes this, is what they're saying. And then they quote, they say, why Seth Bodnar supports letting almost anyone in. He says no way to funding border and immigration enforcement to keep criminals and terrorists out. And they cite Nonstop Local YouTube from March 5th, 2026. Now, this is really interesting because this is where you start to see kind of the tactics they're using here. Because what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna bring up the video from Nonstop Local, their YouTube channel for March 5th, 2026, and I'm gonna play it for you where he says no way. And I want you to tell me how that's connected to border funding and immigration enforcement. maybe you could say in some way it is, but it is so far off. They're basically taking his words out of context to try and prove the point, which I think is false in the first place. Okay, so here's the YouTube channel again. This is Nonstop Local, and it is from, what did I say? It was from March 5th, 2026. This is an interview that Bodnar gave right after he kind of declared that he was coming into the race. Pretty good, short interview, but pretty good. Just giving you a first impression of this man and what he thinks. Again, I've never met Seth Bodnar. He wasn't the president when I was at the University of Montana. I went to a couple alumni events where I heard him speak and seemed like a pretty nice guy overall. But I've never had any talks with him. I don't know what his real policy agenda is. I know in the past, I think he voted Democrat or had some liberal positions, but I don't never talked to him. So this is kind of our first look at what as a politician, what he's saying. And right when I start the video, I just want you to know he's talking about Trump's big, beautiful bill. And you'll see this is where he says, no way. Not connecting specifically to border funding, but let me just play it and let you hear it.
Saw a bill passed this summer that added $1 trillion of tax cuts to the wealthiest families, wealthiest people in this country, cutting healthcare for 31,000 Montanans, putting our rural hospitals at risk of a financial crisis. We need leaders who are going to stand up and say, no way, that's not serving Montanans, and who are going to push back when party bosses try to do that sort of thing.
Okay, so again, saying no way to the big, beautiful bill. Now, in this flyer, they're connecting that all the way to him specifically saying no to border security. That's a big leap. I'm sorry. I read the big, beautiful bill the other night, all 800 and some pages of it. To be honest, there's some things there I like. There's a couple of things I was like, this doesn't make any sense to me. I don't know why we would do this. I think anybody, even my conservative friends, could look at that and say, yeah, there's some things here that are just stupid. That's all he's saying. Now, he makes some claims about the effects of the big, beautiful bill on Montana towards rural hospitals. He gave 31,000 Montanans losing their health care, whatever. I don't know anything about those claims. Those are things we'll look into later because I think that's worth looking into. But just want to point out, in that flyer where they say no way to funding border immigration for he didn't specifically say that. He said no way to a lot of the stuff in that bill. And some people might think I'm minor, but that's actually a pretty big leap. And it just shows me that our boys at the UPS store in Northwest Washington are trying to mislead you. It's misrepresenting what he's saying. I'm going to show you the next slide. Let's actually listen some more about what he said about border security, because I think that's kind of interesting too. Same interview, again, Nonstop Local, on March 5th, 2026. Just to give you some context, I'm starting a video, right? He was just asked a question, what's the difference between basically an independent and a conservative, or and a Republican, an independent and a Democrat? That's kind of the question he's answering when he makes these statements right here.
Deserve.
To be an independent, though, you must see things on both sides that you agree with. What are some of those things? Give us the policy pitch, if you will. This is the first time we're hearing from you on a political front.
No, agreed. I mean, I think we need leaders who can say, hey, we need strong borders in this country. We need to enforce our immigration laws. Absolutely. But I believe that we can do that in a way that that doesn't infringe on the individual liberties of American citizens.
That's what he thinks about the border. Okay, you know how politicians are. Maybe he knows that for Montana, that's kind of what you have to say, maybe. But publicly, that's what he is saying. We have to follow the laws that are in place. We have to have border security. You heard it from him right there. But again, he has a concern for individual liberties. So I guess more to follow. We'll see as this campaign goes on and he's in debates and he talks more about this. We'll maybe understand some more. But again, I just want to point out that's what he said in that interview, not that he was against all these border security things. 100% misrepresentation, I believe, an attempt by our boys at the UPS store to mislead you for their own political gain, whatever that is. Whoever is paying them to do this, that was the point. It's not truthful. And I believe that's why I hate these flyers. that final kind of thing they have cited there. He said opposed 170.1 billion for immigration, opposed border wall construction, opposed hiring border patrol agents. And then they quote the Washington Post. So what they're basically doing here, and again, I'm misrepresenting. It's an attempt to give a false impression, which I think is just wrong. Is they're saying, okay, he opposed this huge bill, 800 pages of it, and in that 800-page bill, there were these specific measures. As far as I can see, anything I've seen, Seth Bodnar has not come out and said, I oppose each of those things. From what he said in the interview, he actually says, hey, we need to enforce these laws. So, again, misrepresentation. These guys are digging for something to find on this guy. They haven't found enough yet, I guess, so they're digging pretty deep. I went to the Washington Post. You see there on the bottom, they cite the Washington Post, March 6, 2026. That's the day after he gave that interview. And if you notice some context to the big thing, this is the day that supposedly our Republican Senator Steve Daines kind of said, I'm not going to run. And then immediately the guy who's running his place immediately jumped in and didn't allow anybody else to come into the race. And so the Washington Post put out an article about that situation, which talked about Seth Bodnar. Is that our friends at the UPS store in Washington put this out. I couldn't really find exactly what they were talking about. They just give the Washington Post. I mean, the Washington Post has hundreds of articles a day. I went to March 6, 2026. I found this article. This is the closest one I could find. It had Seth Bodnar in it. Maybe there was another one. I couldn't see it. So again, hey guys, let's get some better citing next time. Let's be more specific so we can actually look at what you're trying to talk to us about, hopefully not lie to us about. But this is an article. It says, since when do senators anoint their own successors? And this is talking about the incident that happened in Montana with former Senator Daines, his current Senator Daines, and what he did to kind of, they think, anoint his replacement. And so that's what this article is talking about. And but they say that this is to prove that he opposed all these things. That's what they're trying to prove. They said this article shows, if this is the right article, show me another article if I'm wrong, Stephen. But this is what they are saying. And so I went through this article. I'm not going to show it. You have to pay to see the Washington Post. I don't want to get in trouble with the Washington Post by showing the article free, which I had to pay for. But if you go here, you find this again. This was on March 6, 2026, and it is called Since When Do Senators Anoint Their Successors? The Washington Post. You go down, eventually Seth Bodnar talks. They have some quotes by him. And this is, I'll summarize. You check me out, go there, read this for yourself, and tell me if I'm lying to you. But what he says in this article, what Seth says is he did not support Trump's big, beautiful bill. Okay, got that. I don't know if I support all of it either, but okay, that was the first statement he made. And then he said, this was interesting. He said, Trump was right. The border needed to be secured. Openly says that. Trump was right. He had no problem saying that straight out. It's in his article. Pretty much what he said on the interview we saw also on Nonstop News. Then he also made the point, we need to enforce immigration policy, full stop. So I don't know why they're citing this article as something to say that he opposes those things. Now, yeah, he never specifically says that he opposes border patrols, wall construction, any of that stuff. But these guys from our Washington, D.C. UPS office want you to believe that. And so what I think you should do is, there's one more thing on this flyer. Ask you to do, they say, hey, email Seth Bodnar. They give, I guess that must be his email address, and tell him his agenda puts Montana at risk. Okay, so what's the purpose of that? Okay, if they were truthful in what they were saying, if they really were trying to tell the truth about Seth Bodnar, which I don't think they are, from what I've shown you and what they've shown us, this would be an attempt to say, hey, Seth, you need to change your policies. We disagree with them. That's what it looks like. But I think what this really is probably an attempt to just send a lot of email to Seth that now he has to deal with. And so the people who are really sending Seth things about want to know, they have to wade through this to find out what's the good email not. It's kind of a waste of this time. I think that's what this is. I might be wrong. Stephen, from your UPS headquarters in Washington, if I am wrong, please tell me. I will correct the record, but that's what it looks like to me. So, hey, that's all I have on this. For this edition, this is our first edition. Thank you for listening. In the future, I'll have an option where you can write back to me, tell me if I lied or if you thought I lied, and you can show me the facts. I did something incorrect. I'll gladly correct the record. Again, we're going both sides here. We're going to be looking for one the Democrats have put out. I haven't seen one yet, at least a flyer. I'm sure it's coming, and when it comes, we'll be back out there doing this for you. So thanks for listening, and I hope you hear from us again.